Traveling the Vortex. This is Sylvester McCoy, and I'm listening to Travel the Vortex. Although there might be tangents ahead. Da-dee-da-da-da.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and landed at episode number 239. And don't interrupt me when I'm eulogizing. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Better now.
Better now?
Better now.
Not bad earlier?
No, it was, we went to a Royals game today, which was great. They won, so that's always a good day.
Even better.
Showed up, first inning, 4 runs. I was like, all right, we're off to a good start. Second inning, got a homer, solo. I was like, all right. Nothing happened after that, but they sent us some very, very nice seats up in the nosebleeds in the upper deck, but we were in the shade, which is pretty much the only thing that made it bearable because it was so humid.
Oh, and hot.
And it's just one of those that you just sap the energy and the strength right out of you. I mean, It was just that. And Katrina went with us. It was her first Royals game, and she lasted all of about 2 hours before she started getting kind of fussy. So I went and walked with her around, and we went down to the kids area, and rode the carousel. And so I hadn't been back there since all that went in, which was kind of cool. And I felt bad. There was a father there who was riding the carousel, and he goes, "Yeah, I didn't want to watch a baseball game today anyway." Yeah. And I said, "Well, you got to see all the runs at the beginning, right? You saw the homer. That's all you need." He goes, "Yeah, that's about when we got up to come down here. Been down here ever since." It was only a 4-hour drive up, and I went, "Oh man!" I said, "Do you have anything else planned to Kansas City?" He goes, "Nope, this was it."
Oh man!
Just riding around and around on the carousel apparently the whole day. It's like, well, you enjoy that.
Went to a Royals game, rode the carousel.
Yeah, but just on the way back, just driving home, it hit me kind of all of a sudden. It was just how physically draining that was, and I started getting the migraine, and I might have had a little touch of heat stroke or something.
Dehydration.
Yeah, so I actually called in. I was supposed to be at inventory tonight, and I sent Matt a text. I was like, I have this massive headache. I'm going to take a nap and see if I can get it to go away and then come in, and I didn't wind up waking up to go in. So I'm sorry I wasn't there. I feel a little better now, though. But That's good. That was a good day other than that.
I took Mason to the pool today to the North Aquatic Center. His Cub Scout thing that was postponed from last week was this weekend, and Holly and Caitlin were volunteering at Helping Hands this afternoon. So I loaded the boy up, took him up there. We swam for a couple hours, which wasn't bad. That was first time I've actually been to that pool and swam. I went there back when it first opened and shot video of it for work, but several times. But this is the first time. That place is big. I didn't realize how big that place was.
When did that place open?
Early 2000s.
Okay, then it's a different one. We used to go to the one up north all the time as kids, but
yeah,
it would have been before they opened.
Oh
that
yeah,
one.
no, this has only probably been around. Oh yeah, it's got a couple slides, lazy river.
Oh wow,
0 entry, really nice kiddie pool area. It's really nice. And we've spent most of our time, I think, on the lazy river. You're only supposed to take 4 laps around before you give off your inner tube. I think we went 5. But that was part of that was because when you come to the place where you're supposed to, the water actually pushes you as you come to the disembarking part of the lazy river. It pushes you to the side, and it's supposed to push you into the area, the handoff area.
Oh yeah.
And as we came by, every time it would push us over, and I'd grab Mason and kind of pull us so we'd go on down, keep going around the lap. And the last time that we were getting ready to disembark, we got up there and he was clear to the left, and he went on. So the time we were actually going to get off, first time he actually didn't get caught up in that current. So I shifted myself and we went around one more time. It was fun.
Lazy rivers are awesome. I love lazy rivers.
But the winter tubes are too slow or too small for me to sit like on top of, so I just kind of put it around me and just leaned on it.
Yeah,
but it was nice. And my sister and my niece were there. They were completely by coincidence. They went Friday night because they had that big Waterpalooza thing.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a bunch of like stuff that Josie didn't want to do. She just wanted to swim, and they gave her the impression that you kind of had to do just the activities, but it was free. And so she was like, I don't really want to do this. And so her mom said, well, we'll come back on Sunday. So they came back on Sunday. So we hung out with them for a little while. That was it. I didn't watch anything, didn't do anything else. Pretty boring week. Getting the kids ready for get back into school mode, and that starts in a couple weeks. We have to enroll on Wednesday, both kids.
Wow.
Yeah. And
It's
then
coming up quick.
Yep. And
It
then
is almost the end of July.
yeah, it'll be they'll go back third week in August, second week in August, third full week in August. And then so I've just been getting stuff done around the house, getting ready for a garage sale next weekend. So
I have some stuff if you want to sell it.
oh, bring it by.
I'll bring it to at least one thing to you at work, because we went over to my dad's and got the rest of my stuff out of his basement. So for the first time in 10 years or so, I have everything under all of my stuff under one roof. So I discovered...
Well, you now have room for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I also got my twin beds. We can set up our spare bedroom just in time for my sister to come and visit. So
It worked out well.
yeah, that's kind of why we did it this
Now
weekend.
Audie can stay over too.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
And if any of our listeners have any stuff they'd like to send to Glenn's garage
Send
sale,
it my way.
No promise you'll get the money for it.
Put your name
but
on it. We'll put your name on it. I'll get you the money.
I also replaced locks in the house. First time ever doing that. Bought a new... Because our back door, we didn't get keys to the back door. For whatever reason. She gave us keys. We got an extra one that didn't go to anything. And the back door, we had no way to lock it.
it wasn't the same key as the front door?
No, it wasn't. So we went out and bought a new front door lock, just to be on the safe side, and new back door deadbolts and knob. And we got the smart kind where you can program it. So we were able to program the front locks and the back locks all to be the same key, which was the one that we already had on our key rings.
Fancy.
Yeah. It's really fancy. And it was really easy to install. It took me about an hour to do the back and front door. I had struggled a bit with the knob part, but once I figured it out, I was like, oh, okay. And then I struggled a bit with the front because I wound up not even putting two pieces on. I think they're seals or something, but I didn't want to have to drill a bigger hole in the door, and otherwise, because it wouldn't have gone in the hole otherwise. So, yeah, that was pretty.
You'll
productive.
regret that in the winter when the draft's coming through.
I'm sure there will be more draft coming through the windows than the
Old windows.
yeah. And then we watched Exodus: Gods and Kings,
Oh,
the Ridley Scott whitewashed Moses movie.
Here's a whole bunch of white people playing
Well,
Middle Eastern
aside from the big
ethnic roles.
Aside from the big names, there were actually a couple Middle Eastern ethnic actresses in it. Like, aside from Sigourney Weaver, pretty much all the actresses were Middle Eastern. So there was that.
Was it good?
It wasn't bad. I don't know if it's great.
Kind of like every other big epic.
I think I'm just not a big fan of Ridley Scott's historicals. Kingdom of Heaven was nice and interesting, but it was just kind of there for me.
Gladiator?
I was not a big fan of Gladiator. I think it hit me at a weird time in my life. Maybe if I went back and rewatched it, I'd like it more.
Yeah, I liked Gladiator, but I thought it was overhyped.
Yeah,
quite honestly.
Maybe it was the overhyping because I saw it. I heard so much about how it was amazing, and I watched it and I was like,
I'm amazed that we all said the word gladiator without doing the not Joan Collins, Elizabeth Taylor. Gladiator.
And this one just kind of sits there for me. I mean, they did some kind of interesting things, but it's the story of Exodus. There's not much you can do with it. It's not like Robin Hood where you could take 17 different approaches to it, or King Arthur where there's so many different ways you can take it. There's really only one way you can tell the story, and this time there's no singing.
No singing.
Did Charlton Heston show up?
He did not show up.
Well, then it's a flop.
He's passed away now.
It's kind of hard for Heston to show up in a film now.
They could have digitally put him in.
Christian
If
Bale
Heston showed up, resurrected from the dead and showed up, I'd probably decide
not
that
dead, is
they
he?
might be onto something with this Christianity thing.
Is he dead?
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah.
He died a couple years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't think he was dead. I'm going to look that up.
You look that up. Christian Bale did an okay job as Moses. Joel Edgerton was all right as Ramses. Surprisingly, Ben Kingsley's in it. It's kind of a nice
Why
surprise.
is that surprising?
I don't know. I just didn't expect to see it. He was never advertised.
He's like in everything now.
Aaron Paul is in it. A lot of small bit parts. Like Sigourney Weaver plays Ramsey's mom. She has like 10 minutes of screen time. It's like, why did you... I know Ridley's probably great friends with her, but why did you get her for that role? And it's such a small role. It wasn't even an important one. So why not actually get an ethnic person for that role, too?
April 5th, 2008.
Yeah.
Good.
He's been dead
I
for a
said
while.
A few years ago. I said
Wow.
2 years ago. It's a few years ago.
Okay. So John Heston wasn't in it.
He was
That's
not in it.
That's what you're...
They did some kind of fresh approaches to the plagues and kind of quasi, some of them logically explained, well, okay, here's why it's in the sequential order. Like, okay, the river runs red because it was blood, and the blood brings the flies, and the flies bring the frogs, and then the frogs die, and that brings the pestilence, and et cetera, et cetera. They did a really cool way of doing that, and then it kind of goes off the rail with the final plague, you know?
You mean Angel of Death?
well, I mean, the firstborn son of every,
Yeah, Angel of Death.
I guess technically that would
That was the plague. That's what killed the firstborn sons. If you put
They did
lamb's
not call
blood,
him that.
if you didn't put lamb's blood above your door, then you weren't safe.
And
you weren't passed over.
the random tornadoes showed up and storms and those were parts of it. Was like, really, I could almost buy thunderstorms and stuff popping up, but then random tornadoes out of nowhere and but
God works in mysterious ways.
Why would you go through all the effort to make a scientific rationale for the first 6?
and then they did, and then they really went with, well, it's God on the last 3 or 4. And then the approach for the Red Sea was actually pretty neat. It wasn't so much parting as they don't explain how. It just kind of goes away and then comes back. But it's not like the literal center split open.
Right.
It was kind of that's a nice change. If you got 2.5 hours to kill and pick up the library, I'd go for it. We were morbidly curious enough to check it out. Still haven't watched Noah, and that's on Netflix. So,
Is it now?
yeah, that shows the hierarchy.
One of
I
big
heard much worse things.
Giant
about Noah,
rock
though.
angels build the ark.
I'm kind of tempted just because it's a Darren Aronofsky film. John, did you guys watch anything?
We watched Mission Impossible 3, which Mel swears up and down she has never seen in her life. And the kids were like, I'm pretty sure we went and saw that, Mom. She's like, I have no memory of this. I have like, she sat there like this, kind of, and then as the film went on, just her eyes got real big, and she just, she was into it. And I looked at her and I said, you don't remember this, do you? I've never seen this before. Like, oh, well, it's all new to you then. But, yeah, still awesome. Still a very, very good one.
I don't think I've ever seen 3.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you should.
Did you see Ghost Protocol?
Nope.
You did what I did. You just quit it too.
I quit it too when I saw it in
I
the
went
cheap
back
theater.
and saw 3 and 4. But
I'm nearly done with Lego Hobbit. All I've got is Hub levels, which has put me very far behind on all my shows.
well, what do we got in news this week then?
News. Peter Capaldi recently was on the Doctor Who fan YouTube thingy that the BBC has put together. The fan show is what it's called. And he was asked to name which Doctor Who adventures he'd pop into a DVD player on a rainy day. Top 10. Doctor Who Rainy Day stories for Peter Capaldi.
Okay, so we're gonna do this. We're gonna do the bit here. If we're gonna do this, we're gonna do.
I don't think these are in any order. I think these are in chronological order.
We're doing Letterman. So these are the top 10 Doctor Who episodes that Peter Capaldi would pop in on a rainy day.
Rose.
You can say number 10.
Number 10. Rose. Well, these aren't numbered, so I don't know if these are actually
Doesn't
his.
matter.
Okay.
Number 10.
Number 10. Rose.
Do you really think any of Letterman's stuff was numbered properly?
Well, it did tend to
I
go
guarantee-
from least ridiculous to most ridiculous.
I guarantee you, he took that blue card out, he looked at it and went, this one's funnier, I'm going to save it for last.
Well, that's what he did. He would save the funniest for last. So Rose, or
So number 10 is Rose.
number 10 is Rose. Number 9 is Girl in the Fireplace. Number 8 is The Vampires of Venice.
Interesting choice at number 8.
Yeah. 7, The Rings of Akhaten.
These were just new, right?
I have not looked at the full list, so I'm not entirely sure. Go to my next page. It's not loading. And if you go watch the YouTube video, he'll expound on why he likes these
On a rainy day.
on a rainy day. Sometimes. This one, for Rings of Akhaten, he just said, I like it a lot.
Well, that's my reason for liking that.
This is not just new series. What number was I on? 6?
7.
7? Number
Hey,
6?
No.
You ready for 6?
No.
No,
Yeah.
ready for 5.
No.
Whatever, just read them.
7.
The Ark in Space.
Yay! Ark in Space. That's a great rainy day Who.
Terror of the Autons. Frontier in Space.
Sean goes, no.
No, I like Frontier.
We don't like this follow-up of Frontier.
I like the follow-up, too. I just wish that they were more... we discussed it. It's one I wish they were more interconnected, but...
Yeah.
Taken by itself, I'm okay with it. Doing them
You like
back
the
to back.
Draconians.
I love the Draconians,
That's, yeah.
which I imagine is why that one's so high on Capaldi's list, because I know he's a big proponent of
Yeah.
them as well. And I'd still, man, I'd love to see them come back.
The rest of his list include the Dalek invasion of Earth, the Web of Fear, and
Number 1,
Mind Robber.
the number one
Wow.
to put in on a rainy day, according to Peter Capaldi,
Mind Robber.
is the Mind
He
Robber.
says the Mind Robber is absolutely brilliant. Watch that if you get any time on a rainy day, because it's just one of the most extraordinary. Because is one of the most extraordinary actors. Just his delicacy, his ability to jump from irate to being kindly and clownish.
Good list.
Very good list. On the same YouTube video, Capaldi has said, which is a bit fitting with our part of our discussion this week, he really wants Mondazzi and Cybermen to properly come back. He wants a genesis of the Cybermen story. He said, we should either have them becoming some Time Lords and somehow channeling it so they could have access across time and space, or I think it would be good if we had a genesis of the Cybermen. We found out the Doctor on Mondas itself in an adventure where he discovered the Cybermen actually being created.
Been
So-
done.
He wants to see... he wants to bring spare parts to TV
Properly.
properly. He also says he'd like to see the Axons, Demons, Zarbi, and the Menoptra come back.
Who wants the Zarbi?
And the Menoptra.
You could do them well now.
Which ones were the Menoptra?
You do the Menoptra
Those were the
well,
butterflies.
too. Yeah.
Oh, the Zarbi. Yeah, okay. same
You
one.
could do them all pretty
Zarbi
well
would be
now.
And who else was on that list?
Axons and Demons. So Azal.
As all.
That's all, yeah.
The demons.
Somebody had to do it, didn't they?
I
Well,
resisted.
we didn't
I
get Cleopatra.
resisted.
We didn't get Elizabeth Taylor. So, in the hierarchy of the probability of those coming back, I can see the Draconians very, very easily. Actually, I can see the
He
Draconians.
didn't say Draconians.
No, well, he had said once upon a time that he would like to see
okay.
them.
Sean really wants it to.
But I really
Yeah.
want the Draconians. But I can also. They're one of those. They're ones that logically make sense to come back. It's not. I mean, if you can bring the Zygons back, for Pete's sake, you can do the Draconians. The makeup's not outlandishly silly.
It's true.
The Zarbi, on the other hand,
They'd have
that
to be
comic did it really well.
completely CGI.
yeah, I don't think you could.
You could do it. It'd be simple to do the Zarbi. And the
Well, I guess they did the Makra.
The Menoptera.
yeah,
Menoptera?
sure.
Whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah, the Mac we barely saw 'em,
axons.
but we just saw claws come up.
They were completely CG. I think.
Yeah, no, that's why it's easy to do that kind of thing. I think the furthest step away from the original look of anything so far has had to be the underground dwellers. Madame Vestra. What the heck are they?
Silurians?
Thank you, Silurians. That's the most
Yeah.
departure from, I think, the original look.
Be cool
And
if
it's
they could-
fine. I mean,
It'd be
And
cool if they
they
could
gave
bring
it
the
a-
Sea Devils back.
yeah.
Like, honest to goodness, Sea
Would be
Devils
cool.
would be pretty cool. But
They could do the heads with CGI.
Yeah.
maybe we get the Draconians and the Sea Devils to team up.
No.
Only if we get a hovercraft.
But still, top of the list is Draconians. I still think you do that. But Mondosian Cybermen, I think, as a
I think the way Peter wants to have it done, I think would probably be hard. Because I think he wants to see the original design back on TV, and to get the modern audience to swallow that
Yep.
between the Cybermen we know now would be a lot harder to do. It's harder to do Genesis of the Cybermen like Genesis of the Daleks on television. Because there's not a lot of change in the Daleks over the years. Not like Cybermen. That's the bigger challenge. Because Attack of the Cybermen, you kind of have to hand wave stuff, as listeners and viewers will know soon when we rewatch a Friday Night Who. How so much of that is supposed to be set. It was before a lot of. It's supposed to be very early Mondos, right? I'm trying to remember now.
Attack was not
Yeah.
Mondos, though. It was
Oh, it's Telos.
Telos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was still supposed to be the earlier Cybermen, but they look like the 80s Cybermen. You know,
yes.
kind of one of those things.
I'd almost think it'd be more interesting to do go even earlier back, do an adventure.
Pre-spare parts.
We land and maybe the Doctor sets things in motion that then causes Mondos to drift.
Yeah.
Out
That
of
would
it.
be cool.
And you don't find out you're on Mondos until the end of the episode.
Yeah.
That would be like,
That
oh
would be
wow,
cool.
you know.
But then you wouldn't have Mondosian Cybermen. So.
But then they wouldn't show up. So I don't know.
That's a more likely way to do it now.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have any monsters. So.
True. Well, we didn't have any monsters in Listen.
True.
There was the thing in the bed.
The last bit of news was Doctor Who magazine recently came out. And Colin Baker, they had a very long interview with him. And he spoke about being the lowest ranked compared to the others doctors. And he says, I know there are some people who rate my doctor quite highly. It's just there's an even greater number who don't rate him at all. And it wounds me. I should be able to rise above it, and I pretend I don't care, but I actually do care. I think it's a shame that people think that way. I can understand why. There's a lot. You have to really delve into his character to appreciate it.
I'm sorry that it happens, but it just there's just you can't let it trouble you, because I mean obviously it does and it can, but you have to try not to let it trouble you, which he obviously makes an attempt to not let it bother him, but it does.
How can you not let it bother you?
I mean, that's all situational, because I mean his doctor didn't even really get a chance, and he had too many strikes against him, and it wasn't his fault by any means, and I think most fans recognize that nowadays.
There was a great discussion on our Facebook page about it, and one thing I think is a bad strike against him for modern fans is there's none of him on Netflix.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy to dip into him and get a taste of him at all, unless you go out and buy something, which most fans are more than willing to do that. But if you don't know if you like the Doctor, you're not as willing to purchase it.
That's a very good point.
And I think that's why also a lot of the times nowadays it's ranked so low.
Just keep in mind, if you're a completist, he's one of the easiest doctors to have the entire. It's
true.
I'm almost there.
Well, it's. He also talks in the article about how Capaldi's doctor is often compared to him, and how he wishes he could kind of play that role now.
Well, and 9 had what his jacket should have been, what his outfit should have been.
Well, and he even says how much he loves Capaldi's style, his outfit, because it would have fit with that too. That would have looked good on it.
Yeah. All right, shall we move on to feedback?
I have no comment. He's 100% right, and it's unfortunate. And I mean, as we've alluded to before, you can point to the times and the costume and the writing. And
I think the problem that
with him and Perry and
I think the problem I have is every time an interview with him crops up, that's the topic of discussion. I don't think that's his fault. I think it's the interviewer's fault. And I wish that I could just see an interview with Colin Baker where he talked about all the good things and about how wonderful Big Finish is and how he was the one that stepped into the role of the stage play when Pertwee became ill. I mean, I wish somebody would focus on how, and I think this article does. I haven't read all of it, but
it's a pretty lengthy article, isn't it?
It is. It's 6 pages, and it's Doctor Who magazine, so it's microscopic text.
Really big pages.
8, 9. It was actually almost 10 pages worth of interview here, but it's. I wish somebody would sit down and talk to him about all of that, because to me, he's the greatest ambassador for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because to come in such a tumultuous time in the series, play the Doctor, not want to leave. I think the only strike against him is that he, and understandably so, didn't come back for his regeneration. But it's completely understandable, and I see why he wouldn't want to do something like that. But beyond that, he's never been ashamed of being the Doctor. He always wanted to do more. He always talked about the things that he would have done with the Doctor, and he's had that chance again in Big Finish. And I think that's the problem, is because, in fact, I didn't even click on the article because that's the clickbait subject that came up on all of the Facebook sites and all of the Doctor Who news fan news sites. Everybody has that that headline: Colin Baker sad that his Doctor's rank lost. Well, yeah, okay. I know that. I've known that for 20 years. And it's one of those things that I'd like to see Colin has no regrets, or Colin, points out all the great things about the Sixth Doctor. That's what I want to see. And so I don't even bother clicking on those when there's a headline, because it's almost like, well, no duh. I mean,
they took out the juiciest little bit that they can make people click on.
And I don't know why they do that. Well, they do that for the new fans that aren't as familiar with the classic series, but I don't know why they do that, because more fans are going to click on that article looking for the
Sixth Doctor
nuggets
fans,
about their dog. About their.
What was it that he refused to come back, or they didn't invite him back for his regeneration?
They
invited him back.
They did invite him back after they fired him.
Yeah, he had already been fired, though. So.
I mean, and it was a legit.
You're fired.
You're fired. Oh, can you come back to shoot this?
Yeah.
And at that point, it was like, no, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't come back either.
I think they got around it. They didn't ruin anything. I mean, if you look really close, you can tell it's Sylvester in a wig, but
it's the same set of people that don't want to include. I mean, we've talked before about how rankings are that we will not. We're going to abstain from trying to put together who's your favorite, because it's just not fair. But it's the same group of people that have this. Oh, well, Paul McGann's not a real Doctor because it was an American production.
Yeah.
It's just, so if that makes you feel any better, Colin,
some people don't.
In some circles, you're not last.
That's true.
Because there's one Doctor out there that's not even a Doctor, because it was an American production.
All right, shall we move on to feedback?
Yes, feedback. First up is Holly. Holly writes, The Curse of Fenric and the Harvest. Hey guys, The Curse of Fenric. I have to say this was a very interesting take on the vampire myth. I was pleasantly surprised that it was not vampires, but hemivores of the non-straw carrying variety. Still creepy. I really felt for Ace in this one. We find out more about her family history, as well as what means the Doctor will go to make sure they will get out of the situation that he's in with his companion, even if it means breaking the trust they had built up. The Harvest. Cybermen are up to their old tricks again with trying to hide in plain sight. Though I do have to admit the times when Cybermen say resistance is futile makes me wonder if they haven't run into the Borg somewhere down the line.
We'll talk about that. That bugged me a little bit.
All in a good Cyberman story. All in all, a good Cyberman story. Looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on these two stories. Holly from Wisconsin. Well, Holly the Cyberman did meet the Borg in that IDW crossover.
Yes, they did.
Assimilation, is that what it was called?
Yeah, Assimilation Cubed or something. Yeah. Up next in feedback, Kirk.
Kirk writes, "Hello, Vortex crew. I was delighted to be able to join in Friday Night Who for the Curse of Fenric. This is one of my favorite McCoy stories. Some people ding it for being a messy goulash of Russians and Vikings and vampire fish and teenage girls and vicars and code cracking and chess games and monsters from a future timeline and military men and about a dozen other elements. Okay, that's fair. But I'd rather a story be ambitious and spill over its seams than some of the less imaginative stories in the Doctor Who canon. Ghostlight has some of the same issues, but suffers because you can't follow the story without cliff notes. As always, Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred simply command the screen, and Ace is given a lot of delightful, substantial things to do. I thought it was great to see the Twitter response to Episode 3. The various story elements come together quickly as that episode leads to the cliffhanger. I forget who said it, but someone commented the third episode is usually boring. Not in The Curse of Fenric. I particularly enjoyed the climax of Episode 4 and the full reveal of the multi-season arc that started for Ace and Dragonfire. This is a big part of why people say that Ace sets the template for modern Doctor Who companions and storytelling. More than ever before, the through line of the series becomes about how the companion changes as a result of her travels with the Doctor. I'm eager to hear your reviews of Fenric. Kirk."
Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk.
Sorry I missed you, Friday.
It was a delight to have you for Friday Night.
Yeah, packed crowd.
Yeah, we had a lot of people.
Yeah, my apologies. Mason was sick, and so there was many hours sitting up with him. I think it was his allergies, really, more than anything. But he had so much drainage and stuff; it was making him nauseous.
Ooh, that's never good.
And last but not least,
Chrissy.
Chrissy writes, "Ace of Sevens. Dear Vortex Boys, I don't have anything to say as far as an introduction other than I'm sorry I yelled at Glenn on Twitter to wake him up during Friday Night Who. In all fairness, Sean told someone to wake you up and I took it upon myself to heed his request. Didn't realize you had sick kids that night. Hope everyone is feeling better." And they are. And he was fine the next morning. That's what happens to Mason, is he'll be sick as a dog one night and the next day he's up with like nothing happened. And the rest of us are all dragging around because we're like, I'm so exhausted. Okay, time for reviews. The Curse of Fenric. When you go into the classic Who story, you expect it to be a certain way. The side characters aren't quite as developed, and you don't expect to delve into the companion's backstory very much. There are often other things that a classic story does instead of keep those deep character moments. But then you get Curse of Fenric, which is almost like a new Who story with the classic Who episode format. It's a strange experience having all those complex story elements going on in the pre-Wilderness story, which is probably why this is so highly regarded. It's something new and different and even reflects the beginning of the change that TV in general was undergoing in the 80s and early 90s. The late 80s and early 90s, at least as far as storytelling goes. This is truly Ace's story, and the fact kind of took me by surprise the first time I saw it. I wasn't used to classic Who going into a companion's character so much. It's a good surprise, don't get me wrong. We spend so much time on what she's doing and what's going on with her that we almost, note that I said almost, miss what's going on with the Doctor and how he's solving the chess puzzle. And that part of the story is mostly good. The only thing I would criticize is that his chess motif is a little heavy-handed. Then again, TV writers back then were just beginning to learn ways of subtleties, so I can forgive that for being a product of its time. Overall, this is a fantastic story, very complex and layered and deep. Not something I'd show a first-time Who viewer, or even a relative newbie, Seems like something better suited for someone who's had a bit more experience with Doctor Who before tackling this. Which is probably a good thing we did this so late. Your experience, Keith.
We were going to start him with Ghostlight, but...
The Harvest. Clear back in 2013, when I was doing my big review series to celebrate the 50th anniversary, this was the story that I chose to review for the Seventh Doctor. Here's a link to that review if you're interested, and we'll include that in the show notes. Listening to the story now, I find that it holds up much the same as it did back then, a whole 2 years ago. I love Hex. He's a wonderful addition to Seven and Ace. He's almost like Ace's kid brother who keeps getting into trouble and she has to bail him out. But at the same time, he is perfectly capable of taking care of himself when the situation gets dire. I know he's got a complex through line throughout his Big Finish run, and we've already touched on some of it, even before this story. Won't say anything more. Spoilers! I haven't gone through all of Hex's stories, mostly because some of it's kind of complicated, and as far as I can tell. So I just figured I'd go through it with you guys and let Sean try to figure it out for me. No pressure.
Yeah, because I scheduled episode 2 in Hex's story first. That's totally a great plan, Chrissy.
The story itself is good, though I have a hard time imagining a Cyberman converting from cyber technology back to human. It's probably something that can be done in audio because the visual of the transition taking place is probably much too gruesome for television, at least on regular BBC programming. Maybe it could be done like the clockwork droids in Deep Breath. And it sounded to me like this cyber controller was even more parts cyber and parts scavenged body parts than he was in Deep Breath. Or than was in Deep Breath. I don't know, just me thinking out loud. Also, that main doctor at the hospital, can't remember his name, I kept thinking his voice sounded a lot like Peter Davison, even though that's obviously not who he is. But it was funny, as I was listening to this story, I kept hearing the voice, thinking, it's the Fifth Doctor. Oh, wait. Wow, that's a long email. I guess I had more to say than I thought. I'll wrap it up here and let someone else take over. Have a great week, boys, and I'll talk to you later. Chrissy.
Thank you, Chrissy. And that's it for feedback. Shall we move on to our review?
Let's.
The Curse of Fenric. The Doctor and Ace are put to the ultimate test when the TARDIS materializes in the Second World War England at the top of a secret naval base. The army church, built on Viking graves, bears inscriptions calling for the wolves of Fenric to return for their treasure. Thereafter, evil will reign. Even as the Doctor translates the inscription, hideous corpses rise up from the sea, and the evil Fenric is now free to summon his wolves to a killing rampage.
Dun, dun, dun! Glenn did not give that a terribly enthusiastic...
Oh, I just got to it late.
Okay.
It's got some issues, but...
Overall, a really good story, in my opinion.
So, confession time. Hadn't seen this one before.
I've only seen part of it because you made me stop.
I think I have seen the first episode, the first segment.
I thought I'd seen a third of it, or I thought I'd seen 2/3 of it. That was before I realized it was 4 episodes.
I'm not the only one, right?
I got to the third episode, and because I watched it Saturday because I was playing catch up, and I had the disc, so I popped it in and pushed play all. So I didn't have the benefit of seeing a playlist on Netflix. So I start the first story and I get through it. And I said the second story and I get through it. And I get the third story and I get through it. And most of the way through, I'm thinking, this is a lot they're going to have to wrap up here. What's going? And the third story is, as was alluded to in the feedback, and you guys talked about a little bit on Friday Night Who, really is clipping along. So it really felt like it was the last story, and I was just going to get everything. And then there was another cliffhanger, and I went, is this 4 stories or 4 episodes? And I looked at the I was like, oh, sure enough, it is. So then I had started this thing like super late on Saturday thinking, it's only an hour and a half, 3 20-minute episodes. It's not even quite an hour and a half.
It's about an hour, yeah.
No. Longer than I thought. So, no, but it was
it's only a 4-parter. No, it's 7.
But yeah, I was quite shocked that there was a 4-part, or 4-part.
I can see why you guys thought that, because Survival's 3, right?
Ghost Lights.
And Ghost Light's 3. So it's bookended with 3-parters. So
Happiness Patrol was 3, wasn't it?
Happiness
Patrol's
Patrol's 3.
I think there was a good chunk of his
Dragonfire's 3, I think.
era. Is it? Is it?
I think. Could be wrong.
Delta and the Bannerman is definitely 3, I think.
Time of the Running's a 4, but
Yeah, Time of the Running's 4.
at any rate, and we even talked about it as maybe because you, what was it that you had said about? You didn't use the word, but something about the info dump, or somebody had tweeted that they always felt like the Seventh Doctor stories jumped straight in. Was that?
Oh,
you?
yeah,
Was that
I
somebody
tweeted
else?
that,
You
yeah.
tweeted that. Okay, I couldn't remember if you were just agreeing with them or not. You tweeted that, and I said, well, maybe it's because they're all 3-parters. And you were like, yeah, that makes sense. And then we went 4, and I went, and I had the Netflix
there's a lot
thing.
of them are 3-parters.
I had the Netflix list. It was like starting episode 2. Oh, okay. And I almost, when I did the thing, I almost typed, and now the conclusion. And that would have ended badly. But yeah, I didn't realize this was a 4-parter. But not that there's a problem, because unlike so many of the 4-parters, where episode 3, as somebody alluded to, tends to be boring, usually because that's the info dump.
Yeah, that's okay, we got to set these pieces
Here's
in
where
motion.
they explain everything, and then you get the conclusion. Episode 3 is just a big action set piece. I mean, we kind of range all over the place, and we're the tunnels, and we're the thing, and the army comes down, and I mean, it's like you said. I mean, it just ramped up all of a sudden, and then it ended. I was like, why is there a cliffhanger? We got one more to go. I really liked this story. It's full, as Kirk pointed out. It does kind of bust out at the seams just a little bit with everything that's going on in it. But I think it's one of those that, because of the layers of it, because of so much of the stuff in it, I think this is one that I'm going to be able to go back and rewatch over and over and over and over and over again, and continue to catch new things each time with it, without taking away from the overall core story.
Yeah.
And how enjoyable that was, and the ace transition that happens in this one.
Well, yeah, because it kind of starts off as your typical story, and then after all the action, suddenly turns into this, oh wow, this is a huge ace-centric backstory plot.
And it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Well, and so much of the Seventh Doctor era that we've listened to in Big Finish, for me, I've enjoyed it, but I couldn't quite understand how they got to that point. Now I get it. This is the template, this type of story they decided to tell
is where they're
in
going.
Big Finish.
Yeah.
This is
where they were going with the Seventh Doctor's era in that final season.
Yeah.
And sadly,
Between Ghost-
it almost feels too late.
Yeah, between, well, even earlier up to like Resurrection, but they're still kind of a bit more humorous. There is not a lot of humorous Doctor in this story. I don't think he's he's the somber Doctor that we often get in Big Finish, and even in the other stories like Ghostlight and Survival, he tends to be a bit more cheerful. So
A little more clownish.
yeah, I didn't want to use the word clownish.
It's more like theater performer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
but
vaudevillian.
yeah, vaudevillion's a great word for it. But it's one of those, and for me, it's the Big Finish. I've always been like, okay, I could see they were going that direction, and I felt like they had just taken that step. I think I'd said that before, that it felt like it was going one way, and Big Finish saw that and stepped that way. Now I see it wasn't a big step. It was just continuing based off of this story specifically.
I think that I like this story, but I think I more like what this story wants to be. I think, unfortunately, it does suffer from being a messy goulash of Russians and Vikings and vampire fish and teenage girls and vicars and code cracking and chess games and monsters from the future timeline and military men and about a dozen other elements. I think Kirk hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I think this would have made a wonderful new adventure novel. I think that this, if you could flesh a lot of this stuff out, I think it would have been a really good story. I think because of what Chrissy pointed out, that this type of storytelling was in its infancy, it suffers from being able to do it well.
Yeah.
And I think that the writer, Ian...
Briggs?
No.
Yeah, Briggs.
Is it Ian Briggs?
Yep.
Okay. Ian Briggs. Thank you, Sean. Sorry. I think the writer...
I'm reading the book, so I have a leg up on that.
If the writer wrote Doctor Who now, he would be one of those type of writers that could take a story arc, a theme through an entire season.
Oh, yeah.
And paint a beautiful story, even throwing in Monster of the Week type stories in there. I think that he could craft a Stephen Moffat-esque arc. Unfortunately, and I'm glad this had 4 episodes. I'm so glad that it had 4 episodes, because if you'd have tried to condense this down to 3, and this is probably why it got 4, there was no way that this could have been pulled off. I think it suffers from moving too fast from one element to another element to another element to try to cram everything in.
Yeah.
And so I'm with Sean, though, in the sense this is one that I could watch over and over again and probably get more out of it while still enjoying the central core of the story, picking up on more aspects of it even as I watched it more often.
The first episode's very schizophrenic.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't really settle on what kind of story it's telling until probably it's part 2.
Pretty much not until the girls turn into vampires that
really
that's when all everything gels together and you understand why the girls were there in the story and to move everything forward. Yeah, and that's when it kind of all comes to a head.
Well, in the first story, the girls are just girls. I mean, they're evacuated. They're young evacuated girls that are just wanting to be rebellious, and they wanted to be young girls. They're wanting to be.
They're ace.
Yeah, very much so. And
from that time period,
what doesn't get driven home for you unless you really look for it is the fact that they were being called by the water. It wasn't that they were just being rebellious and when they wanted to go swimming. It was because they wanted to go swimming. When they got there, they were so compelled into the water by the curse. And so I don't think that is... I think that's far too subtle, and that it's something that you don't really get or understand until later in the story. And that may have been what the author was going for, but I think that's what makes that first episode feel so choppy and hodgepodge, is that you're not getting the meat of the story until much later in the story, when the writer decides to kind of drop the aha, because you're getting hints of it, because you keep getting those wonderful underground shots of the Viking head, the dragon head Viking ship, and the hand, which are wonderfully crafted. They were so well done, and the visually, this piece is stunning. It's wonderful set pieces. The church / castle or fortress is really good, and I'd like to know if obviously a good chunk of that must have been shot in a studio, but the set pieces were wonderful. And then when we're outside doing the OB video, it's framed up so well. It's got these great skyline pieces, and the water and the shots are there, and they're framed up in the over the shoulder when the guy's drawing down on the girls, praying that they don't come any closer because he doesn't want to have to shoot them when they're running up off the beach. Just all of the shots in this are really well done. The element of not seeing what were the creatures called again?
The hemivores.
Hemivores. Not seeing the hemivores, seeing through their point of view, seeing just their hands reaching it. You don't get a lot of that until the final story, when they actually all kind of come up out of the water.
Well, that's part 3, isn't it?
Yeah, well, towards the end of the story.
Yeah.
So I really like the fact that they made a lot of good. The director made a lot of great choices in telling this story. It's just there's far too much crammed in it, and I really, really like what this story wants to be. It just doesn't quite get there because there's far too much going on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conglomeration to look at and kind of figure out, okay, was this really... was it scripted and done on purpose this way or not? Because it almost leaves you with that question of, with as much as going on in episode 1, the fact that it does manage to tie all together at the end. You're kind of left with that. Did it work out that way? I mean, was it luck, or did you really from the beginning know all of this was actually going to happen? I'm just not going to let the audience in on it until part 4.
Yeah.
That this is all it's all related and it's all interconnected, because there's so much of it that seems random. The chess, when the order goes out, burn the chessboards, and I went, what? This guy's just crazy. But no, there's a legitimate reason for him to have that. But obviously the shining centerpiece of it is Ace and the transition that she kind of goes through with her relationship with the Doctor and the backstory that she gets, and again, yeah, we've definitely gotten some hints of that in New Who. We've gotten those timey-wimey, the story folding back on itself, things. This was probably the first time that had been attempted, and as Kirk pointed out, it really kind of set the template for what was to come.
I'd heard people say before that Ace was very much a template for the modern companion, and I didn't quite see it. I saw the arc before, like I knew there was the arc and that it was whatnot, and now I understand why they say that.
See, I get a lot of that. I get a lot of that from Ghostlight, because that's where
both.
The Doctor is doing more of the. He's really kind of letting Ace be the sleuth. He's really trying to show her or teach her how to be more observant by allowing her to come up with the answers or the questions as we go, instead of being the companion that asks, what's going on here, so that the Doctor can explain what's going on. He really lets Ace be the one who is discovering things, and sometimes she fails, and sometimes she's dead on. And I think Ghostlight really starts that. You're right. Curse is a lot more,
and retcons a lot of it too. Yeah. Well, it's the retconning part that kind of just smacked me in the face. Like, whoa, okay, yeah, I see how that's the bad wolf of it was there all along, but no one noticed it.
Yeah, it's too with the two girls that they just want to be girls, and I said earlier that they are Ace, and I think the parallels there are really huge, because they are Ace without the tragic backstory. Mm-hmm. That she would have grown up, and time period doesn't matter. That you're still kind of the rebellious, I'm going to go and do what I want to do, and this, that, and the other thing. And when they have that scene on the beach, and they go down into the water, and they're like, come on in, and Ace is like, nah, it's for sissies. Even though she wants to. There's a part of her that desperately wants to. But the Doctor said, don't go in the water. So she's being loyal to that, because she's traveled enough now to know better. And it's just such an interesting parallel that how these paths diverged, that she would have been there had it not been for this, that she would have been of the same mindset, she would have been of the same...
Yeah, had she not been transported away by Fenric.
Yeah, because Ace is... And, I mean, obviously her backstory, the fact that she didn't get along with her mom, that she's had this, I burned down and blew up this house, that I've got, and all of the stuff that kind of led up to that, even before Fenric interfered with her and kind of put her on the path to meeting the Doctor. But just that she would have been there, that she's the same typeset of personality. And so it's a great contrast between the two to kind of show this is where you would have been, but this is where you are. Yeah. And so I think that kind of helps with the whole. I feel like I'm not making any sense, but
no, it makes sense.
Make the Ace arc part of that.
Yeah.
And then to couple on the fact that Fenric's the one that sent you to Ice World. What?
Yeah.
Fenric was responsible for the time storm.
Yes.
For both her and Silver Nemesis, which was kind of a nice, because I looked it up. Ian Briggs wrote Dragonfire, so it makes sense that he did that. But it was really cool, the Silver Nemesis references too. Mm-hmm. The fact the explanation of that, because that's something that kind of doesn't get explained in that story, and we get the payoff here.
Yeah, there's a lot of let's make this one. Of all of the Who that we've had classic that has gone, let's do a whole story over the course of a season, like Key to Time. The Ace era almost fits better as a complete through story than anything that was set out to be a complete through story.
It really does, because even when they do the Key of Time, they still do this. Okay, we're going to do it episodic, and we're just going to make everything tie together. You know what I mean? It's like force tying these together.
Yeah.
What's our central theme? Oh, we're tracking down these pieces of the Key to Time. What are we going to do beyond that? Well, we're just going to do regular run-of-the-mill Doctor Who stories, and then we'll force the Key of Time in there somehow. And that's what those really feel like. Whereas
It's not
this
as well
one,
planned out.
while it's still a very episodic in the sense that there's something different going on in every story, Ace's central theme really plays out really well throughout that, as though it was crafted to be done that way.
Well, and as you said, I mean, because we've got references here to Dragonfire, we've got references to Ghostlight, we've got references to Silver Nemesis. It's just kind of bam, 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 and it's like all of that culminating in this one episode.
It's interesting that there are the Ghostlight references, since it was intended to be a foreshadowing instead of a callback. That's kind of knowing that aspect. It's kind of neat hearing those and thinking, oh, that was laying the groundwork for Ghostlight.
But it works both ways.
Yeah, it really does.
Well, because they made it work the other way.
I thought, I think all the performances in this are I think, really good. Obviously,
Except for the Russians, their accents were terrible. One guy sounds like he's French.
I really like the priest in this story.
yeah,
good.
I like the vicar. I like,
And his story did not go where I expected it.
Yeah. And I always appreciate it, regardless of the vampire story, when it's whatever your faith is in is what repels them. I think the first one I was aware of it in, I think it was I Am Legend. The original story was, and just that idea I always love. And the fact that they used that here, even though they weren't true vampires.
Well, they added the scientific spin to it, too, that it creates the psychic barrier. Yeah. And I was like, perfect.
And that's a great way to scientifically
exactly what you need to do.
Doctor Who explain it.
Yeah.
and it's tragic because the vicar starts off, and you get just that little piece where the old crotchety, what's her name? I called her Elmira Gulch because that's just what she reminded of, is the Wicked Witch of the West. But where she's going on and on and on about, well, it doesn't feel like church anymore, and this, that, and everything. You get just a piece of that.
Was that Miss Hardiker? No, Miss Hardiker was the one who was helping the doctor, or the scientist doctor. What was her name?
But you get just a drop of that scene when they introduce the vicar, and then to come around and have that come full circle when the fish vampires are saying your faith isn't strong enough. You doubt yourself, and then he falls, and it's like, oh man. But, I mean, they set it up right at the beginning, so it's another one of those geniusly plotted pieces that you didn't think was going to work, but then it turns out to.
Well, it was Miss Hardiker, yeah, and her two charges, Jean and Phyllis, yeah. Miss Hardiker was the Wicked Witch of the West.
I like the professor, especially once he becomes Fenric.
Yeah.
Because he started off and he was just kind of there.
I thought it was
I don't know. I thought
telegraphed.
he was really good in that. He just was that very inquisitive and very into his work and then into what he was doing, and it was very obviously he has his own tragic backstory. He had some accident in school, and he's, as the caretaker keeps saying, an invalid, and he finally corrects her and says, I'm crippled, not an invalid. But very focused it into what he was doing, excited about what was going on, excited about this, giant supercomputer. And then, yes, to be able to turn and become something very different when he is Fenric, I thought that was very, very, very
and a great lighting effect, too, with the way his eyes, that was effective. Very creepy.
It's a bit serendipitous having just watched Imitation Game, because he's designing that machine he was using.
Yeah. And then I liked the lead Russian. I kind of would, they kind of laid some groundwork there for maybe a little romance going on between him and Ace.
That was the one part of it that felt a little forced and a little rushed to me.
It did, but I was glad that they didn't take it any further than they did. It was just kind of that flirtatious.
And her going off to flirt with the one guy. That is some gothic flirting right there.
That's how we did it in the old days.
But she's from the present time, which made it even more awkward.
I guess she's been traveling long enough to know how to flirt in different time periods.
It's almost as though they wrote that part and they said, well, this is still a kids program, so we need to pare this back a bit. And then they pared it back too much, and it was like, is she flirting? Is that what she's supposed to be doing here?
Maybe that's part of the added charm, is the fact that, Ace is...
She's mysterious.
I can handle this, and she has no idea what she's doing because she's Ace, and she's going to charge out there and blow something up and doesn't know anything about it. And it's not until she gets into that she's like, maybe this plan isn't as well thought out as I thought it was.
Maybe.
If she had given us a look like she hadn't intended to do that, maybe. I like the design of the Hemivores, too.
Yeah, especially the ancient one.
Oh,
with the eyes that would move. And
that
the
was
mouth.
impressive.
Although, there was one point where the mouth wasn't moving and it was talking, and I thought, okay.
I thought the
High marks for the outfit, for the costume. It looks
Yeah.
really, really incredible. And then when the doctor was talking to him, his mouth was moving. And I thought, well, why wasn't his mouth moving earlier? It must have been a mechanical problem.
Yeah.
A problem with it earlier.
Because when we first see him, it's not working.
Because when
And then
Finrick's
not
talking
blinking
to
or
him,
anything,
it's not
yeah.
working. And then when the doctor's talking to him, he's moving his mouth. And I thought, well, no, this is really great. Why wasn't it like this
The
earlier?
first time it blinked, I was blown away. Just, wow.
Cool.
It's a bit like you can see some of the production values from Battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
People mock that monster, but that had great production value.
No, absolutely. Looks good.
It almost looks like they kind of took him and tweaked him and they turned him into a fish, pretty much. But
No, I think the only one I can kind of complain about is the main general, because he's that stereotypical
Well, he
military
fills that role of the
madman.
story.
Yeah, and
Commander Millington.
once he's revealed to be, I don't know, a religious zealot's not quite the right word, but
He was just nuts.
yeah,
That's really what it boiled down to. He was a bit of a zealot, but he was his mind was gone. You couldn't tell at first, but you could tell at the end that his brain was just mush at that point. And it was just he had
drinking too much of the Kool-Aid.
something. He was just I actually admired his.
The fact that he took that turn and went to the deep end,
Yeah.
helped him from being the just stereotypical
I agree.
Russian general.
Yeah.
I agree. And I actually admired the way that he was very militaristic. He was very good and he was a very leader. This is the way we do it. And he was that stereotype, but you kind of looked at it and went, okay, you just expect this from this type of person. And then as the character goes on, you're going, man, this guy is just way too militant, and he's way too.
I mean, to go
Set
from,
in
your office is designed to look like Hitler's office so
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
think like the enemy. It's like, okay, that's this guy. I get it. I'm in his head now. Because, okay, cool. But it went well beyond that.
The first time where something's amiss is when he says, burn the chess sets. And I thought, why are we burning the chess sets? Where does that come from? Smash all the communications. You really need to smash them all?
Disable.
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 That's right, because the guy was in there smashing them, and I thought, I'm not sure that's what he meant. But he says, disable all the communications. And I thought, okay, you've got this ploy for the Russians to steal this thing, and that's where you're going with it. But do you really have to disable all of the communications? And then he go in and he's disabled them.
I want to do
Now put them back together.
I want to do a most interesting man in the world meme with that soldier. I don't always disable the communication sets, but when I do, it's with an axe. It's just, dude, you could have unplugged it. This is
Cross some wires. It'll be
This is
good.
the 40s. You could have removed like a radar tube or something that just pull out of the back and the whole thing would go down, right? This is all one component. You just take it out and you pocket it and you're good.
I think the other problem is and this is budget, this is production, and there's no way to get around this. And they did a fine job with what they had to work with. But there were just too few men on both sides.
The armies were pretty small.
You've got this decoding supercomputer that should have been much more protected than it was. Now, you could argue that they weren't protecting it well because they were intending for the Russians to come in and steal it. But then you've got this like little tiny group of Russian guys that I think these armies are just too small.
They didn't have enough guys to lift the computer.
Yeah.
How are they going to get it away?
They were just stealing the part.
Oh, was it just the part?
I think they were just going to take that main part.
Central section of it, maybe.
I
don't know.
The brain?
I still had to suspend a lot of belief in order to go, yeah, okay.
Maybe this was just the advanced party. Securing the base so then that the rest can come in and...
I don't... No, and the only thing that you could... The only way you could justify it is the fact that they were still in the thrones of World War II. And so you had to still pretend that you were allies. So you couldn't send a whole massive army because then suddenly you've got some conflict of interest there. So you have to send a small party so that they can infiltrate it and get the heck out of there.
There's a Russian sub off the coast. Don't get me wrong.
Who knows how many got lost in the water on the way too?
The two boats of guys that landed on shore. You notice we went to 10 Little Indians mode on them real quick.
The point is, if we have to go to such great lengths to justify it, it probably wasn't done
the problem. Yeah.
And then the captain of the Russian army, he was a good actor and he was convincing all the way down except for his accent. He sounded French through the whole thing, and I kept thinking this guy could have worked on the accent a little better. All of those Russians could have worked on their accent a little better, but I do like the fact that when they first come on shore, they're speaking Russian. Yeah, and then the commander says, all English now. It was like, oh, good. I don't have to read subtitles the whole time. I'm not Keith. I can't watch this with subtitles the whole time.
I also loved the doctor's speech at the end. The conversation with him and Ace. That was so impactful.
It's so heartbreaking when he starts...
trying to convince her otherwise. Well,
it's so heartbreaking when he has to... say the things that he does in order for her to break her belief in him, because all the while in your mind you're going, he doesn't really mean this. This isn't powerful because he means what he's saying. Because I having that scene with him talking to the Ancient One, I already knew why he was doing it, but it still was just so heartbreaking to see Ace, and maybe that's where the conveyance was best used, is the fact that she really looked like she was taking it to heart, and I thought, please get to the part where he explains to her that was all ruse.
Both Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred just killed it in this episode.
I can see why this story is regarded as one of the highest of their era.
Yeah. And to get... You commented a little bit about the clownish doctor earlier, but to get those moments like at the beginning when they stride into the camp and...
When he just takes over and... Yeah. That's the doctor I'm used
Everybody
to
halt. It's about time you stopped me. And then to type up orders on official stationery.
Well, and then sign it.
And then sign it. I think you'll find it signed by the Prime Minister.
What? That's the doctor I'm used to seeing, and then he just takes this such dark turn that, it's a great exploration for his character too.
Which almost makes you wonder if did he know how to sign Churchill's name because they had already met at this point? Or?
Maybe we'll find out in the Churchill Adventures. Big Finish.
But yeah, Sophie Aldred was... And I like the end, too, where she dives into the water and comes up and she's smiling again. It's kind of like we've washed all that away now.
Most of the way through. And as you know, I have made nearly a 180-degree turnaround on the Seventh Doctor just over the course of the last couple of years. But I was shouting in my mind, if you would have only let me watch this one sooner, I could have been more forgiving of the Seventh Doctor. For all these years, nearly 5 years we've been doing this podcast, I could have been more forgiving for the Seventh Doctor. if I'd have only seen this one and got some more perspective. Because if I'd have seen this one earlier, I would have gone, McCoy's a great doctor when he's got a good story.
I think you can say that about any of them.
Yeah.
No. The story still... I can and I do, but the stories still completely throttle my enjoyment of Sylvester McCoy and some of his era. There's still
no. I mean,
Delta.
you can say the same thing about like Colin.
Any doctor.
Well,
Colin's a great doctor when he has
yeah.
a good story, and
Yeah.
that's the important lesson from anybody's standpoint is if you don't have a good script, and that's why as a writer I will tout this to the highest levels of government. You got to start with that framework. You got to have a good story to hang everything on. Otherwise, it doesn't work. These half-baked concepts, and let's make another Transformers movie. It's like, okay, you have a story this time? No, all right. But yeah, I think, and that's one of the things that reading Andrew Cartmell's book as I'm going through, and I'll give you a little more next week when we do the whole trilogy. But that's one of the biggest complaints is he felt like he needed to right the ship because there was so much of the previous era that just didn't quite work.
Yeah.
Well, even Sylvester's, for the first part of Sylvester's era was just rocky. There's way too much. There was way too much pandering to the higher ups. That's what it boils down to. There was too much J&T. I think that's what I like about from Remembrance of the Daleks all the way on. I feel like J&T finally took a back seat and said, "You guys run this thing, and I will be the bean counter," is what it really feels like. And then even seeing some of the when you watch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and the documentaries that they do on these, you get the impression that J&T had stepped so much away from it that they were able to start, as you said, right the ship and get it back on track and not have so much Moffat to it. Although I think Moffat's doing a good job steering this ship, don't get me wrong, but I can see that potential with Stephen Moffat as well. He is far too much a Clara, a control freak.
Say it isn't so. Any final thoughts on this one?
No, it's good. I'm excited to talk about the Ace trilogy as a whole next week.
Yeah.
Especially now having seen all of them.
I'm hoping Survival has a new light on the heels of this one.
I wish it did. Survival's got its shining beacons in it as well. So
Yeah. The Harvest. On the morning of October 12th, 2021, Hex woke up. He was expecting to go to work at St. Gart's in London as normal, and that evening have a great time at the bar The White Rabbit, celebrating his 23rd birthday. But his ex-flatmate is wheeled into A&E following a bike accident, and a strange young woman from Human Resources tries to chat him up, and an 8-foot-tall guy is in a Merc tries to run him down. Hex realizes things are not going quite as he expected. Then, in a Shoreditch car park, he meets the enigmatic doctor, who explains that he's an extraterrestrial investigator, and something's very strange going up on the 31st floor of St. Gart's. Therefore, aided and abetted by the doctor and his other new friend, Just McShane, Hex decides to investigate. Trouble is, everything that goes on at the hospital is being observed and noted by the occupants of the 31st floor. Occupants who are none too pleased that people are poking their noses into business that doesn't concern them. Occupants who still go to extraordinary lengths to ensure that no one discovers the truth.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's a good dun dun dun. It's a good story.
I think I made the comment last week that you were excited about this, that you had me correct this because there were Cybermen in this.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I just they are listed on the wiki, the Doctor Who audio play wiki, which is a fantastic resource that you guys need to use. It lists, companion. And
are you saying we don't?
I'm just saying, if anybody out there,
He came across your era.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the wikis.
Not that wiki. I had a different wiki.
Oh,
he
yeah.
had a different wiki. I like the wiki, But it lists
Wiki.
who's in the story and the villain and whatnot. And I had seen it there when I went back and made that correction last week. Then promptly forgot about it. Because I think there was a part of my brain that went, oh, you may have just spoiled the story. And so I think the rest of my brain went, yeah, and clamped down on it and forgot about it. Because when they showed up, I was surprised. Like, I didn't know it was a Cyberman story going into it. And so I sit down and I start listening, and it's no, we're going on. It's like, oh, weird. We got, this genetic engineering. What's going on the 31st floor? Project C. Okay.
C program.
Yeah, whatever. And then, Doctor, there's Cybermen! And I went, oh, there are Cybermen in this story?
I just got that.
Did you really?
It didn't even occur to me. Wait, there were Cybermen in
There were
this story?
Cybermen in this story. Kind of.
Oh, I got the impression there were actual Cybermen, too.
Well,
Kind of.
That was enough that Ace recognized that they were Cybermen.
So I liked it. I liked it for all those elements. However,
the Cyberman plot, I question a little bit.
I
give it props for giving it creativity and trying to do something different with the Cybermen. And the Cybermen under almost kind of like the Daleks in Destiny understand that they need some creativity in order to succeed in their plans.
And I love
that's
that
a great
aspect
exploration.
Of it. Yeah,
And
we've got to start thinking outside the box. And I went, oh, this is going to be sweet. Unfortunately, and maybe unfortunately, maybe not, because I'm sure if it hadn't gone this way, I would have found something to complain about, that it wasn't a standard Cyberman story. But by going outside of the box and giving me that, oh, this is new, and the Doctor's genuinely...
Did you guys fall for it? Did you think that this had actually been like a lone bunch of Cybermen that wanted to revert back to their Mondos?
Yeah.
So did I.
I bought it.
And that's what I think disappointed me ultimately, was that
wasn't.
It reverted to type, and it became just a, ha, 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 we're taking over the planet, but we're doing it this way. And it's like,
At least they took a different approach of how they were going to take over the planet.
yeah, I mean it's still props for ingenuity, and like I said, the concept is great, but I almost feel like there's a better morality tale to be told with a lone group of Cybermen that have decided enough's enough, we want to reclaim our humanity. Give me that story, because that just sounded phenomenal. And then instead we get random army guys out there who have been cyberdized.
Yeah, we got to that before the big reveal. I thought the guy in charge of the program, the government dude, was, oh, wow, that's the bad guy, not the Cyberman. And then he promptly dies. And yeah.
It's one of those that at that point it's not even necessarily all that satisfying, because it's like, yeah, well, saw that coming.
Yeah.
You gave them the code to the weapons locker? What? This isn't going to end well for you. And well, it didn't. I don't know. That was just I did. I fell bait, and so I completely forgot that Cybermen were this. I had no idea. So then when that showed up, I was like, oh, Cybermen. But then it was different Cybermen. I was like,
I like how the big finishes are trying to shy away from of the Cybermen or of the Daleks, because the Charlie Pollard last story did not have Cybermen in the title either.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise when they showed up. I like the surprise of. Granted, this one wasn't, because I did research into this story to figure out if I listened to it or not.
Sorry,
it was still.
I was surprised because I didn't know. I guess I zoned out when you said that last week about.
I figure most of what
story.
I say you're kind of.
And so when they showed up, I was pleasantly surprised by it. I too liked the fact that they were going somewhere different with them, and did feel a bit cheated when we kind of reverted back to the norm, but.
Although Harvest is a great title for a Cyberman story.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh.
I didn't think this story was particularly great, and it really just kind of felt like a middle-of-the-road story that was enjoyable. It was fun to listen to. I really like Hex.
It's a great introduction to a new companion.
It is a good
and that's what this story does more than anything else, is it's an introductory story. The first two parts are very much building Hex as a character and giving him depth, and then him dealing with this alien menace in the second half.
I very much enjoy that they're going they go the route with the Doctor that I think they've done a few times in Big Finish Audio, where the Doctor really feels like he's got things under control, and then it kind of just slips away from him a bit, and he has to kind of regain some footing. So that was pleasant because they've been kind of doing that, especially with some of the side trip ones, or sidestep ones. But I don't know. Just overall, I wasn't thoroughly excited about it. But again, it wasn't a disappointment at all. It was kind of just middle of the road for me, and I liked the idea of crafting human parts back onto Cybermen in order to make them more humanistic. But the problem I had with that is it almost implied that that's all you have to do in order to reinstate that emotion and that and kind of sidestep that logical thinking. And I always got the impression that while that stripped away their humanity by converting them to Cybermen, that there was always that one last step that shut that emotion off. And I think maybe I'm getting like most of that from Attack of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. Or not Attack of the Cybermen.
Age of Steel.
Rise
of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. And Age of Steel, Rise of the Cybermen. And so I kind of always got that impression. So when they kind of just tried to turn it back to, well, all you have to do is get the feelings and things like that. That was one of those. I'm not sure if I quite think that you could just that would be the switch to turn it back on.
Well, didn't the Doctor turn it back on for the one woman, as she was dying? In that two.
That's what I'm saying. There it was fine, but we're talking about different Cybermen.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
That I think is what planted that idea for me.
That it's a switch.
But I never got that. I guess I kind of brought that impression over into this. So it wasn't a problem when they did it. But in this one, it never seems to me that would have been the switch. Not that it couldn't be done. I almost more feel like there is that internal switch that needs to be
switched it instead of going in the flesh, stay metal.
Yeah, and they tried to imply, which is fine, and maybe that's the case, but that just didn't. I don't know. It didn't seem right to me, but it seemed too.
I didn't quite understand how that whole thing would work.
It seemed too Machiavellian to me to kind of do that, but.
I really look forward to hearing more Hex stories.
Yeah, Hex was a good point. I liked the other Doctor in this too. It was just I kept feeling so bad for the poor guy because they were just using him. That's all they were doing was using him. And he was a unwilling participant through this whole thing.
He thought he was doing good.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, this poor guy. And I kept thinking, somebody will apologize to him. And finally Ace said, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, okay, finally.
After just a minute earlier admonishing him for whining or whatever it was that was, whatever he was doing, and she just kind of, man up.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I'm sorry you got dragged into this.
But my biggest problem with this was so minute that it shouldn't have even been a problem. But the first person says, I think it was one of the Cybermen says, resistance is futile. And I went, that's not right.
Its resistance is
Don't
useless.
say that. And then somebody else said it. And I went, oh my gosh, you guys you've got Star Trek on the brain. It was written useless and you turned it into futile. And I quit doing that. That's not right. And then when the Doctor says, I know, resistance is useless and on. And I was like, finally! And from that point, every time it was said again, it was resistance is useless. And I thought, that's a big, glaring mistake now that you allowed two actors to say resistance is futile, which is completely lifted from the Borg, who in turn arguably could have did lift it from the Cybermen, but you use resistance is useless, not futile. Futile is the Borg, useless is Cybermen. And it just stuck in my brain the whole time that I was listening to this going, oh, I wish they'd have gone back and fixed that.
I'm going to fix it for you right now. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The two instances, because you can't say resistance is futile in my presence without me cueing into that. The two times it's said are both humans that have become Cybermen.
Under the human control.
Under human control. Resistance is useless is said by legit Cybermen who
and
are
the Doctor, who's heard it from the Cybermen.
Who are then trying to become human. So I will argue that it was done on purpose because since this is set in 2021 and we know
already part of their psyche.
Star Trek is a thing, in this universe, that they've heard it before, and so it's just part of that human conditioning that's still coming over. That was what that said.
Okay.
I was going to present the exact argument.
Were you really?
Yeah.
High five.
Doesn't work, but yeah. should I mean, yeah, it.
If you drop it in
That's
there
a
once,
good way. That's a good way to
fix it
for you.
I agree with you.
Not work.
If you drop it in there once, it's like, haha, I see what you did there. Use it twice, it's a
wasn't
mistake.
even I did it once. It was. That's not right. Do it right. Do it the right way. If you're doing Doctor Who here, not Star Trek, do it the right way.
A reference would have been having a human character say it, and the Cybermen correct him.
Yeah. Now, I would have bought his explanation for that if that had happened. I'd have gone, okay, now they're being clever.
Well, in all fairness, Dan Abnett, who wrote this, I can't really know if I side too much with him, as he is also responsible for the story of Martha.
Oh,
so that suddenly, in some ways, vastly elevates this audio adventure.
We got it right this time.
Yeah.
Well, this was released 2004, so he wrote the story of Martha way later.
Yeah.
I know.
He tried. He abysmally failed, but he tried.
He tried.
I'm sure he's done many other things. He does a lot of comic books. He writes superhero stuff. Apparently, was responsible for something that became the core of the new Guardians of the Galaxy characters. And I mean, he's a name, but yeah,
that's okay. We all have our story of Martha's.
We all have our Cybermen, Bob.
I think one of the standout parts of this story for me is the Doctor interacting with Hex. Those scenes were just so enjoyable of him being so gobsmacked of, oh my God. And then the Doctor making fun of him because of it. And Sylvester played it in such a way.
Not God, the Doctor.
He played it in that newfound somber way that the Seventh Doctor has to him. But it was written in that vaudevillian tone that it was such an interesting mesh to hear him be kind of somber about making these jokes and making fun of this guy who's trying to deal with all of these things. And then the fact that Hex decides to join and the Doctor leaves it up to Ace. I think I really liked all of that.
I also like that the Doctor set the TARDIS down on Totter's Lane again. It wasn't in the junkyard this time. It was in a car park, but
the junkyard no
is now a car
exists.
park.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's a lot of shining moments of it for me. I can see where you say it's kind of middle of the road.
I don't have a lot of negative things to say about it because it was a fine story. It was good. It was interesting and it kept me interested. It clipped along. I don't think it dragged anywhere. And good on you, Big Finish, for doing another fine Doctor Who audio story.
Another good Seventh Doctor story.
Another good Seventh Doctor story. Yeah. If anything, it's continuing to grow my love of the Seventh Doctor. Anything else?
Speculate. Had this been a group of Cybermen not planning to take over the world, but legitimately had broken free of their programming and were attempting to return to their human roots, would the Doctor have been able to
accept it?
Yeah.
Would he have pulled a Seventh Doctor ebook?
Yes. Would it have been the Daleks are evil, period?
No, I don't think so.
He almost bought it.
Yeah, the reason being is because in this story he does show some sympathy. He does show some compassion for the idea. And so I think, and as you said, he almost falls for it. So I think in this instance, I think the doctor could have. I don't think he's as prejudiced. He doesn't come across as he's prejudiced, but as prejudiced as he is against the Daleks.
Yeah.
Is it because maybe Cybermen were human once?
I think maybe that's what it is, because I think while the Daleks,
they've been mutated by radiation, etc.
And they've always, from the core, from their genesis, have been evil.
Yeah.
The Cybermen took a journey from one point to another, and if they are on a journey back, I think there's some forgiveness and some compassion for the idea that, okay, maybe this would work.
Because it's a journey, they could go back.
Yeah. So, no, I don't think so. We wouldn't have gotten a Seventh Doctor ebook moment.
What about Ace?
Ace was good in this one.
I mean, do you think Ace would have questioned it, or would she have just been like, nope?
I think she's at the point now in her relationship with the Doctor that she is nearly, even despite some of the things that happened in such stories as Colditz and things like that, she just has this trust in the Doctor that I think that they've really cultivated, and I think that if the Doctor says it's a good idea, 90% of the time she's going to go along with it and say, all right, it's a good idea. Obviously the Doctor knows what he's doing. I mean, she was so... that was one of the things that I'm glad you pointed that out. She was very comfortable in her shoes in this whole undercover case. She was very into her role. She was very quick on her... fast on her feet. She was very, quick-witted. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I think in that, a lot of that is culminated because of her relationship with the Doctor, that she trusts him, and she knows that he trusts her. And no, I think that she'd have just gone along with it. I think she would have questioned whether it was the right idea, but I don't think she would have stood against it.
It's fun that we paired these up together in a way that we see the younger Ace, who has gotten to the point where she implicitly trusts the Doctor in Cursa Fenric, and now we're getting the older Jess McShane, who still implicitly trusts the Doctor,
but in a different way.
But in a far different way.
And knows the Doctor well enough that great little line she had about the Doctor has a plan unless it goes wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
and the fact that she knows the Doctor,
I think she recognizes it.
Yeah, that she knows that not everything goes his way, and she can adapt and adjust accordingly. But if he said no, this is how it is, I think she would go along with it, depending. Usually.
Anything else?
No.
All right. What we got coming up on the schedule?
Well, coming up next week on the schedule, for Friday Night Who at the end of July, we're going to do Survival, which finishes out the Ace trilogy. And then the culmination of all of that, our episode next week on number 240. Good Lord. Dorothy Gale McShane and the Ace trilogy, because we will cover kind of the whole thing. Ghost Like Cursa Fenric and Survival, and the arc that's buried in there. And we will have some added insights from novelizations and from Andrew Cartmell's book I hope to have finished by then. So all kinds of good things there. A return for Colin Baker the following week, Attack of the Cybermen. So more Cybermen for you, Keith. And then we're going to cover a little bit about Kansas City Comic Con, featuring Colin Baker the following week. And I don't know that we'll have much to talk about that, so we might have to come up with some extra topics to throw in there for you.
I'll be in Tulsa, so I'll talk about my trip.
There you go. It's just going to be a rip-roaring, exciting travel log that week, boys, let me tell you. And then, excuse me, on the 14th, we jump back into New Who with Partners in Crime, just because it's been a while since we've done that one. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Titan Doctor Who comics again in episode 242 with some of the stuff they've got coming up. And hopefully a surprise. So that's as far out as I've got scheduled, but I'm putting together the final pieces now for what will lead up to Easter Saturday. I blanked. What season are we on? 9?
9.
Season 9. It was
Series 9.
Leading up to series. There's a number here. 9.
If we hadn't taken a year off, we'd be at Series 10 for the 10th anniversary of the new series.
Yep.
I'd have been 10, but I was sick a year.
Be sure to stop by our website if you haven't recently. There's some changes there. And obviously, always try to support us where you can. Our Amazon shop, there's some Amazon links on there. Our Spreadshirt shop has a couple more designs in it. And hopefully, shortly after this goes out, there'll be another design on there that you might chuckle about. Sean has come up with.
I'm very excited.
And then, of course, always support us on Patreon, because that is a very useful resource for us as far as keeping the show on the air, on the airwaves.
And thank you so much to everyone who does and continues to do so, and those of you who listen to us, because obviously we wouldn't be here without you guys.
That's right.
Well, we'd be here, but...
All right. Was that going to do it?
Yep.
All right. If that's it for this week, until next week, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.